The most thrilling part and the most thrilling aspect of my spiritual journey and just the enlightenment path for anybody in general, I believe, is the realization of enlightenment actually being a possibility for you. And I've been on this spiritual journey for nearly 5 years now. And I think this is a huge step for anybody on their spiritual path, because usually what I see that happens, even with myself, is that you go through what is called the dark night of the soul, where you have this huge amount of trauma, or this huge amount of uncertainty being blasted onto your existence, and you start to see no light at the end of the tunnel until finally you just keep walking and you keep walking and you keep walking through the darkness, and you finally start to see a light at the end. It's like the longest spiritual night of your life. And yet you're going through the motions of the day, you're going through your work, you're going through whatever you're going through at your job, or with your family, or with your friends, or with anything that's going on in your life altogether. You know, you're attending certain parties, or whatever's going on in your life. You're not feeling it though. And so what I've noticed is that it's the it's the spiritual opening of your soul when you participate in the act of imagination and putting that imagination into action. So you're not only actively imagining things, you're also putting it into existence. And so what I've also realized is that enlightenment is the vindication of the Logos. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the Logos can best be described as divine reasoning. And I put that in quotation marks because I would prefer to just use the term Logos from here on out. But the Logos gives meaning, it gives reason, it gives order, it gives balance, and it also gives a sense of timelessness to the complexities of life without holding any contradictory concepts or ideas in your psyche. In fact, you hold no concepts or no ideas. All you know is nothing. And it's just as Socrates said, he is the wisest because he knows that he knows nothing. And this is something that I learned on psychedelics a while back as well, when I haven't tried them for nearly 2 years now, but well, at least I haven't been on a trip for nearly 2 years. But one thing that happened in one of my experiences was I was in silent darkness, and I was on the heroic dose, which is a lot. It's considered 5 grams of psilocybin. And I was in my room at the time, and I was in the silent darkness, just in that room. And the mushrooms, they started to talk to me, which was very perplexing. And it started to show me a shadow figure. And the shadow figure was as if it was the embodiment of and the archetype of the mushroom. And it started telling me that we're going to dance. And so if you really want to go down and around, well, down and around we go, down and around we go. And it started like the shadow started dancing, but it was a very friendly shadow. And then I started to see this bizarre and amazing cartoon of my ancient ancestors. And it was as if I was living all of the lives of my ancestors all at once. And I didn't understand up until about a year or two ago what the significance of this was. Actually, I guess it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. But I didn't understand because it took so long to digest what I was experiencing, because you feel genuinely in those experiences that you live lifetimes, even though the actual psychedelic experience on mushrooms is only like 4.5, 5 hours. Like, you feel as though you are living lifetimes in that time period. And anybody that has done a high dose of psychedelics understands what I'm talking about. And so you realize that you don't have a grasp on shit. You don't know anything about reality. And in fact, nobody else does either. And so enlightenment is like trying to cling to, at least trying to seek enlightenment, is trying to cling to the idea of something that doesn't really exist, but yet it exists within you. And so it's like trying to, it's like trying to describe water to itself. It's like you can't really hold up a glass of water and then hold up another glass of water and say like, okay, yeah, this is water, ladies and gentlemen. Like, the water just is what it is. And so what I've also noticed on the spiritual path is that for anybody that is not awakened, I call them, the Walking Dead people, because they are spiritually dead, a lot of them. What they need is a form of ambiguous pleasure. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean to say that ambiguous pleasure is neither good nor evil. And so when people that are not awake hear the truth in ambiguous pleasure, it makes them feel alive. And in that making them feel alive, yeah, they might choose to do what they want. But here's the thing, your sins are not their sins, and their sins are not your sins. And I do want to come back to this idea of sin and being born again, but I want to first continue with ambiguous pleasure. So, because ambiguous pleasure is neither good nor evil, it puts you in a place that is out of the ordinary. And that's what most people want anyway. They want to be living a life that is not really ordinary, and yet they still cling to like the past and like traditions in some way, shape, or form. Because otherwise the society will fall apart. And many that are spiritually dead need the blood, sweat, and tears of those that have actually walked the path so that they can be and set the example for those people that are spiritually dead to find their spiritual life. And this is where being born again comes into play. So I've touched on a lot of, well, I guess you could say various Eastern concepts such as enlightenment, but I also think being born again means to be enlightened. And here's why I think that. It's because in December and January, so December of 2021 and January of 2022, which was about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, the proclivity of discernment and spiritual fortitude that I was receiving from God was tremendous. And yet I didn't understand exactly that it was Jesus that was showing me these things up until it just happened. And I literally felt as though I was being brought back to life. It was like I just approached, like, it wasn't the darkest point in my life, because there were some really dark points. I would say I'm 27 now. I would say 24 to 25 was probably that year and a half or so was probably one of the darkest, if not the darkest, of my life. But at this point, I was just looking for direction. I just didn't know where to go. It's not like I didn't have a sense of meaning, but it's not like I had like a way to go toward anyway. I was just, it wasn't like I was drifting, but it wasn't really like I had like a specific destination. Like I was just there. And so that's what I learned, is that a lot of the times what needs to happen is for you to just relax. If you just relaxed and calm down your nervous system and let your nervous system just settle down, because we're constantly stimulated. We're constantly trying to get this, trying to get that, trying to achieve this, trying to achieve that. And I'm not saying that achievements are wrong, but I'm saying that all of your achievements are illusions. And nobody achieves nobody achieves enlightenment. I think attaining enlightenment and achieving enlightenment is not anywhere remotely close to the same thing. Achieving enlightenment means that you've completed something. And you've completed something that took a lot of work to get to. But the funny part about being born again, when I was feeling as though I was literally being brought back to life. I remember just feeling as though I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing, even though I was sitting, I would just go for hours at a time after work and just lay down in silence and just sit down and close my eyes and just lay there. And it's not because I was lazy or anything. It's just I just felt as though my body needed to chill, because I had been through so much trauma and so much gaslighting and manipulation and heartache and all of this crap, that I was just like, you know what? I just intuitively felt I needed to just chill. And so after work those days, for hours at a time, I would just sit in a dark room and just let myself relax. No sound playing. Just, I wasn't even actively meditating, I would say, either. It was just, I was just laying there on the ground and just feeling the presence of my body sinking into the earth. And sinking into the floor, but I was feeling as though I was sinking into the earth deeper and deeper. And so that was a very big part of my spiritual process as well. And even though it wasn't necessarily thrilling, it was exciting to be relaxed for once. It was exciting to actually feel as though I'm grounded for once, because I had not really felt grounded at any other point in my life up until that time. And then when I was literally being brought back to life by Jesus, because that's what it was, I didn't go looking for Jesus. In fact, I wasn't even looking for Jesus at the time. But Jesus was with me nonetheless. And it was almost incomprehensible, the impact that just a single moment has. That just single moment in which all of a sudden the universe made sense. The whole point and the whole complexity of the universe, the whole problem that needed to be solved, that's what I thought I was trying to do. I thought I was trying to solve a problem of life. And in reality, I never had a problem anyway. I never really had a problem. I just had things that I thought were problems in my mind. And so I had all of this time and all of this effort and all of this dedication for what? For nothing? Well, no, not necessarily for nothing, but it was for something in nothing. And I realized that if it weren't for the something in the nothing, there there wouldn't be, something so difficult to understand. So, yeah, I realized that existence itself was an illusion, and yet the timelessness of the moment. I remember the 2 weeks after that, I felt as though I was literally carrying my cross, like full fledged. I was in January. I remember going to the lake. There's a lake nearby where I live, up in the canyon, and it's not a huge lake, but it's it's a small lake, and I remember walking in the snow. It was bitter cold. It was like 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was just icy and snowy, and yet everything just felt so right in that moment. I remember just looking out, and it was like I had seen these kinds of things on psychedelics where I was outside and the colors seemed brighter and everything just seems more alive. But this was like I was completely sober, and I hadn't been doing much of anything to do with anyone or anything. And I was just with me 110%. I was with myself. And everything was just perfect as it was. And the stillness that I felt in that moment, wow. I'd never felt stillness like that. And it was at that point where Jesus was basically saying to me, like, do you trust the process? Do you continuously trust the process? And that was the message for a while after that, is just trust the process. And so that's what I would encourage you all on your path of being born again, to enlightenment, to spiritual wholeness and understanding, is that you just trust the process. Because there's nothing else to trust. There's nothing else to do. So with that being said, I hope this message was useful and insightful. And until next time, peace be with you.